You're listening to CoBB, Conversations on the Business of Brands, with Sudeep Chawla and Sharavana Raghavan.
So, Sharan, do you realize that we are already quarter of century episodes down in this podcast?
Yeah, I realized that. I didn't know how we got there though.
Yeah. So now that we are about 25, 26 episodes down, we thought it'll be a good idea to take up some of the questions that we have received. So today's episode, we will pick up some of these questions and try to give our point of view. If you find these answers useful, please give us a thumbs up and give and rate us for sure. And also, this is an encouragement for all of you out there. If you have questions, find us on YouTube or on LinkedIn and feel free to post questions, and we'll be very happy to answer them.
So we'll take what 5 or 6 questions and take turns answering them. All right. I've got the first question for you. So this comes from a food brand FMCG startup entrepreneur. His question is, when I hear a lot of stories of MNCs and global brands like Harpic, Oreo, Cadbury, etc. on CoB, I realize that brands spend a lot of money and effort in market research to understand the consumer. Is there any research framework or tools that I can use as a startup brand without burning too much money?
To this question, I would possibly say that you don't need to spend as much money, but you definitely need to spend as much effort, because the brand and its positioning and its marketing, its value proposition is owned by senior management. Their significant involvement in this is definitely desirable and required. Now, from a framework point of view, honestly, there is no there are no different frameworks honestly for any small brand or big brand, any startup brand or a MNC brand. The framework is very simple. You have to just make sure that you know your brand and you construct the path to purchase for your consumers. And your path to purchase usually goes via either salience or via some kind of mind measures towards what you're trying to create, which is behavioral measures which lead to sales. Now, if you have made up your mind as to which path to purchase you are going to pursue, all you need to do is go and measure where are you today, and then after your campaign where are you again, and therefore whether you made progress or not. And that measurement, if you have money, if you want to invest into it, you want to do it at a larger scale, you can hire an agency. If you want to do it yourself and you don't have a very large scale, you don't want to spend money, you can print concepts, write down questions, and go directly meet the consumers and ask them. All of these honestly are meant at creating conviction, and so therefore do whatever it takes to create that conviction. Do it yourself, get your teams to do it, or get an agency to do it. But there is no substitute to putting in the thinking effort beforehand, and then finally the effort of honestly doing the research and reading the research and then comprehending it.
In addition to the thinking, right, are Facebook groups. Running surveys in Facebook groups, unbranded Facebook groups, kind of gets you a kind of a read to know if you're on top of mind or if you're even in the consideration set. It might not be the purest form of research, but it's definitely an ad hoc substitute that works largely. And there are a couple of brands, I think they also do WhatsApp group research. I think there's a brand called Conversite, an agency, which is built on running consumer feedback on WhatsApp groups. And I think that's a very interesting phenomenon. And increasingly, I think they will become popular because they're still polishing their tools, how they get into these groups and get the readings. But yeah, there are tools that are coming up. But like like you said, there's no substitute to the effort and the thinking that goes behind it. Money, with money, without money, there will be other options to do this anyway.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. Next question is for you, Sharon.
Yes, please.
So it says, I see you guys write and say a lot about brand purpose. Even in your episode, you both debated it. There is
Right.
so much talk about purpose driven brands. And the Simon Sinek video is very convincing too. What is the final word on brand purpose?
See, my stance hasn't changed much. Just that maybe I could add a little more nuance to it. I don't believe consumers buy a brand because it is a purposeful brand or doing good to society. No. That is driven by the consumer value that the brand is offering. Now, that brand has to fulfill a consumer insight, a consumer problem, even if it's emotional. The consumers need to believe what the brand is fulfilling for them. That's where the brand starts. Now, having a purpose, which is to say I'm going to change the world, is absolutely relevant to the consumer. Now, if you as an entrepreneur, what you do with the money after I as a consumer pay for your services is not really any of my business. But if you're doing good with it, yes, that add brownie points. Now, if you don't tell me and still do it, I really don't care too much. Then where does purpose come in? Now, purpose comes in for your internal stakeholders, for to keep the entire team aligned to a purpose. To say what difference can we collectively make to the world? And that brings people together within the system. Now, there is value washing that happens for a lot of brands. I'm not talking about that. That's what I'm calling out as bull. Internally, as a leadership mechanism, purpose builds great cohesion within the team. And I think that is where Simon Sinek made a mistake in the way he put the entire start with the why process out. He speaks so passionately. He then adds the line say at the end of giving the Apple example, would you like to buy one? That is not how that why is supposed to end. That is to tell people, let's do it. Not would you like to buy one. That is a statement aimed internally. And that is why he is pretty much a leadership coach. It's why today he's rebranded his company as the Infinite Game, telling leaders to get their teams to play the infinite game. They're not telling consumers about the infinite game. So, no matter how passionately Simon Sinek talks about it, brand purpose to the consumer is absolutely irrelevant. It can at best give you added brownie points. It cannot be a differentiating factor versus competition. It cannot be a value proposition to the consumer. It at best can give you brownie points.
So, therefore, your product should do what it's supposed to do. A purpose wouldn't really make a consumer expect less of your product. Product needs to deliver. Now, the only way I can comprehend Simon's argument is that besides making great laptops, great phones, etc., the only reason a consumer believes that they'll be able to buy so many things from Apple is because they also believe that Apple is in the purpose of serving great creative people. So, therefore, they might believe in some part of the purpose, and that purpose just gives them believability that yes, this company can make this
That goes into the proposition, in my opinion.
proposition. So, fair. Yeah. So, basically, if they believe that you can make it, they will still hold you to the same benchmark. It doesn't mean that you can make a poorer laptop. You would have to make a bloody good laptop for it to sell. It's just that the consumer might give you a chance, might possibly test you out just because they like what you do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
So
that
I
kind
think
of gives
that's
me
where it
another,
lies.
brings to mind another example.
Hmm.
So I recently saw an old ad of Mozilla Firefox, the browser. I think it is in the late 2000s. Says there are many good browsers in the market, but few do good. And right below that, I saw a trend line of how Mozilla Firefox continued to fall even after that campaign.
No, I think that is where I think a lot of the marketing managers get misled, where they start thinking that adding purpose would create value for the consumer.
All right, my turn for you now. Jeff Bezos says that customer obsession is the company's single minded obsession. When I see Starbucks, this resonates. They aren't known for their coffee or food, but the service they provide. Should service businesses focus on customer obsession or superior product execution?
I don't think those two actually are mutually exclusive choices. Regardless of whether you are a service business or a product business, The one thing which will keep you in good stead always is customer obsession. If your customer tells you that they need product of a certain quality, you bloody well make that product of that certain quality
Hmm.
or better. Now, in addition to that, if the consumer wants a certain kind of service from you, expects a certain kind of service from you, you might as well design that service for that consumer. Regardless of what you are wanting to make, how you're wanting to design your value proposition, how you're wanting to design your branding elements, how you're wanting to design your GTM, everything has to be consumer customer in. I was reading this book. It is called 4 Ds of Execution. There they give an example about a hotel chain that was trying to get its customer ratings up, and one of the more traditional ways of thinking about it was that let's renovate our hotel, let's make it nicer, etc., etc., because it is very old. They spent a lot of money doing it, and the customers rating remained at the same level that it was before that also. That is when they started looking inward, and they said that what is it that our customers really desire. And then once they did that, then they assigned specific roles to people. They said that we will be known for somebody who pays very close attention to your customer choices. What this hotel chain did is that they started taking notes of everything that their customer does. So for example, if they're a customer who smokes cigar, they would note down what brand of cigar does this customer smoke. Now if they went to clean the room for that customer, and if they have a half smoken cigar in the ashtray, they would buy the same brand and they would replace it in the ashtray. Next time this customer comes in to check in, another instance, they will make sure that the room has that brand of cigar inside it. So slowly but steadily the customer starts getting used to this level of service, and number one, they keep coming back to just to see whether they are still keeping the cigar or not. More importantly, they have created sustainable competitive advantage,
Right.
small preferences, and therefore that is how they created their repository, and at least all their loyal consumers, they were able to deliver superior consumer service, and lo and behold, their ratings were through the roof.
Right.
Yeah, people only wanted to stay at that hotel.
Brilliant.
Now somebody might ask, did they deliver great product, did they deliver great service? I would say the only thing they delivered was customer delight.
Absolutely.
Everything else is incidental. Your product, your service, whatever you do, are all ways and means of delivering what your business is supposed to deliver, which is a value proposition to the customer and a delight for the customer.
Absolutely. And this is why I tell a lot of my clients that it doesn't matter whether you're in the product business or the service business, you are always in the experience business. Now, what is this holistic experience the person is going to get by engaging with your business is all that matters.
You're listening to CoBB, Conversations on the Business of Brands. Your hosts are Sudeep Chawla, marketing practitioner, business leader, and educator to advertising and marketing professionals, and Sharavana Raghavan of Vitral Brand Expertise, growth consultants to consumer facing brands and businesses. For more information, go to cobcast.net. If you find this podcast helpful, please help us by telling your friends and rating us.
So the next one, now this is one, says Byron Sharp
Yeah.
speaks about mass marketing, and Seth Godin speaks about niche marketing. How should an FMCG startup build their brand?
Okay. So here's the deal. I think Byron Sharp, the book he's referring to, he or she's referring to, is How Brands Grow. And that's his most famous piece of writing. And he does talk about mass marketing there. And there is Seth Godin who talks about niche marketing. He talks about direct marketing, I mean, anti direct marketing, permission marketing, and all of it. So I think he's talking about Seth Godin's smallest viable audience concept. So The distinction between the two is that Byron Sharp more talks about advertising and Seth Godin is more talking about brand building. So the difference is that when you're building a brand for a niche is when you manage to create a significant competitive advantage. So he talks about this example of 1,000 fans. Just 1,000 fans, dedicated fans, are good enough to keep a musical performer earning significant amount of money. These 1,000 performers will buy everything you put out. Let's say you put out $100 worth of content, and they buy all $100. So you have $100,000 for the year, and that's a lot of money. That's all you need. So he says, who are your smallest viable audience, and build your brand for them. Now, when you build your brand, it goes across the entire stage, entire consumer journey from awareness to interest to inquiry to decision to experience and advocacy. Now, in this, if you look at Byron Sharp, what is he saying? He's saying the role of advertising or marketing is not to cater to your loyalists of the brand. So there's a general philosophy that a brand must talk to its loyalists and invest behind keeping the loyalists. What he says is if you're only talking to the loyalists, there's little progress you will make because there are various reasons people fall out of a brand. And it could be because of a product, because when they start experiencing the product, there are other forces that come into play, and not all of it is controllable by the brand. So, the job of marketing and advertising is to constantly get in new consumers into the fold, new users into the fold. And the smaller the brand, the higher the attrition of loyal consumers will be. And larger the brand, lesser the attrition will be. So you can become a large brand from a small brand only by bringing in new users. And it is not a Pareto 80-20 principle. Loyal consumers contribute far lesser than you think. That's the myth he's looking to break in that book. So they're actually making very different points. In fact, if you look at what Seth Godin says first, build your brand as per your smallest viable audience, and then leverage your marketing to take it beyond even your smallest viable audience. Look at it as a fountain. You start at a niche, and then as you communicate, you keep flowering. Follow both. Start with Gordon, go to Sharp. By starting with Gordon, you end up sharpening the entire process. And then you by going to Sharp, you broaden your entire process.
Correct.
All right. The next one I have specifically addressed to you, Sudeep. You've spoken a lot about how you write a brief and how legacy agencies like Ogilvy and JWT have engaged with you and helped build the great brands you worked on. Come digital, the sheer content of output, our depth of understanding of a brand is pretty low. Nobody seems to be able to hold one thread of an idea for an extended period of time,
Hmm.
be it the agency or the client. What do you think an agency can do to keep a check on this and maintain singularity of thought between clients and us as brand custodians?
My experience has been that actually agencies which are very successful with digital content, and I'm specifically talking about digital content, and the question is specifically about it also because there it is produced in volume. In days when we used to make just tvcs, used to make possibly one or two tvcs in a year. Now here you are making two posts, two reels a day. Yeah, but I've seen that the agencies which consistently put out good work are the ones that understand the brand language very very well. For example, we work with Shabang, and they've put out some really cool work for, you know, brands like Fevicol, Feviquick, etc.,
Mhm,
because they understand the brands and their language very well. Now to
mhm.
your question, what I've seen works for most of these agencies is that they've got their planners in the right place and they've been able to retain them over a period of time.
Lower churn.
Lower churn. There's no substitute, honestly, for human intelligence. No amount of documentation, no amount of handover, takeover process, etc., can substitute the amount of knowledge that resides with people who work on a brand over a period of time. In fact, I would go one step further, Sharon, and I would say that honestly, on the client side, more often than not, you will have people changing after 2, 3, 4 years. Beyond a certain period of time, it is the agency which becomes the real custodian of the brand. Yeah, a lot of the times it is agency that inducts the people on the client side as to what all work has happened, what is the thinking that went behind it, etc., etc. And hence it is even more paramount for agencies to have people around who have worked on a brand for a period of time and thereby worked out what works for the brand and its consumers. And once you do that, it is not difficult to then maintain singularity of thought across all sort of creative that are being put for. Yeah. But when you're starting, for example, you are in a new engagement with an agency, at that point in time, I think what helps is to sit down with the agency and arrive at a fairly clear, sharp brief for whatever work you are going to do. And while you're arriving at a brief, make sure that your value proposition is worked out, your communication, TG, reason to believe, etc., are worked out, which possibly we have covered in the form of branding frameworks, marketing prerequisite frameworks, etc. If you have done that well and your agency has been taken through it, then you know you've actually achieved the first level. Yeah, where both of you, which is the client and the agency, share a common version of what the brand means to you as well as to the consumers. And then hopefully over a period of time you will nurture this relationship and the agency will do the same, and hence you will be able to build what is called as resident knowledge, which is very very useful, very very valuable as time passes.
And this building of the brand tenets, who should it be triggered by, the client or the agency?
No, I think uh, I don't think it is anybody's prerogative, only prerogative, but I have seen that, you know, it is usually the client. When you have a new engagement, it is the client that wants the agency to get on board, and agency possibly gets their framework into the picture that this is how our teams understand it, and the agency has more teams that needs to develop that understanding than at the client side. So there, because there's a servicing function, there is a planning function, there is a creative function, and hence it always pays to go with the agency's visualization framework, etc., etc. It's a joint process.
Mhm.
But whenever there is a completely new engagement, that is where I think it gets triggered from the client side, but the agency takes the lead in terms of providing the framework and making sure the client is able to record the information in a
Mhm.
proper manner.
Perfect. Perfect. Makes a lot of sense.
So now this one possibly is someone who empathizes with what you do, Sharan.
Okay.
So he says, I run an advertising firm and have been following CoB with interest. I understand the importance of building a brand for the long term, but I work with clients who have no understanding of long term brand building. They want immediate results, and performance marketing is what they insist on doing. How do I convince such clients to take up brand building as an objective?
So, see, I understand where they're coming from, right? And this is born of the logic that brand building will bear fruit only in the long term. All of us are tuned to the thinking that brand building is for the long term, but the benefits don't have to be only in the long term. So there are two ways to do this. One, brand building will give you short term results too. So there is the recent Airbnb campaign. Airbnb is talking about how they've reduced their spend on performance marketing and invested it on brand building, and that has given them even better results than focusing just on performance marketing. That is because they've gotten onto a hook of communicating with people, encouraging them to travel after the pandemic. And people are traveling almost with a vengeance after the lockdown has ended. And Airbnb is getting a significant share of it because they're promising a true experience of the travel and not just the sterile hotel environments. And those there are different hooks. As long as the brand principles are set in stone, as in very clearly defined so that you cannot go wrong, your brand building is for the long term, but it does not have to benefit only in the long term. That said, There is also this thinking on effectiveness, the long and short of it, by Fields and Binet, where they say they actually have an effectiveness framework. So they've studied the FE submissions for quite a few years. And in that, they've said the brands that invest in both simultaneously are the ones that actually reap the most benefit over a certain period of time. And they give a proportion of 60% on brand and 40% on performance or direct marketing. But I'm not sure if the ratio is right. I think every industry, every category's ratio will be different. If it's a high intensity category, yes, your performance will take precedence. And if it's a low intensity category, your brand could take preference. But it's about identifying the right balance for you. So there's a threshold, right? After a point, investing that money in performance marketing also is
Hmm.
not going to give you amplified returns.
Correct.
You can divert funds after that into brand building. And it also helps to understand where they're coming from, because to any marketer or brand custodian, it's easy to justify the spend on performance marketing,
Hmm.
and that's why they choose performance marketing, because it's easily equatable to sales. You just need to give them better ways to judge brand building,
Yeah.
and that's pretty much the only way I've tried it. And yeah, otherwise you have the whole point of building a long-term brand and leaving a legacy, and how without a brand every business transaction is a merely just a transaction. So this is all gyan you can give them, but nothing works like giving them results in the short term
Hmm.
despite brand building.
Why is it that we think that performance marketing is devoid of brand building?
That's a
Yeah.
very good point, actually. Yeah.
So performance marketing, or SCM, like we call a big part of it. Suppose you are doing search engine marketing. Yeah. You can do performance marketing on Facebook, etc., etc. also. But let's talk about SCM, which will constitute a big part of any performance marketing plan. Now, what you're doing is that you're reacting to a certain search term which has been put in by a consumer. The way
Right.
your brand gets listed there, the way your brand ad comes, number one, it starts creating an impression in consumer's mind.
Right.
When the consumer clicks on it, they are going to go on a landing page where they will lead the lead for you, where they will leave their phone number, etc., for you. Now, that landing page design itself is an excellent method of making your branding reach the consumer.
Right.
Yeah. So therefore, each element of performance marketing also is an opportunity to create the brand.
Hmm.
After the lead is left with you, your call center will call them again. That's an opportunity.
Every touch point maximizes the brand experience.
Correct. So therefore, think of all of these as touch points, and each touch point has to be utilized in a manner such that it gives you business at that point in time, but also creates sustainable competitive advantage for you, creates a branding impression for you. Yeah. So therefore, I see this as a win-win on either side. Yeah. Performance marketing is the need for today because the business needs to survive today.
Right.
Yeah. Do it till the time you are in the optimum level. Like you said, Sharon, beyond a certain point in time, it will also become suboptimal.
Exactly.
Yeah. But even your performance marketing itself can be done in a branded way, in a strategic way, such that it creates the brand over a period of time.
Right. I think that's very well put, because this binary thinking is what we need to break out of ourselves, not just the clients,
Yeah.
but ourselves, to say it's not either or. It's about how can I do both. I could balance it. I could go to optimum, or I could do both to serve both.
Hmm.
And taking that holistic perspective is definitely an option that we have, and not just force the clients to do what we think is right.
Hmm. Hmm.
Makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Excellent. Great.
Thank you, Sudeep.
Thank you, Sharon. See you.
Thank you for listening to CoBB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharavana Raghavan. Subscribe and learn more at cobcast.net. That's CoBBCAST.net.